a group of absurdly strong characters, and the guy knows how to be badass in every situation. If you're in the mood for part 2, you already know. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment down here to give us your support and show that you want the sequel. Without further ado, let's get to it. At the beginning of it all, a group of 6 friends decide to become adventurers. Their goal? To travel the world in search of treasure chests, conquer riches, and achieve glory. One of the boys, Mills, makes it clear that the group's only goal is to become the world's greatest heroes. What's more, he dreams of going to the capital Zebrud. A few years after this conversation between the children, Kai walks through the streets and explains how, in the imperial capital, treasure hunters are treated like real stars. They travel the world in search of ruins known as treasure chests. These vaults hold many precious items, but on the other hand, this work is extremely dangerous, as the adventurers face monsters called ghosts. As Kai walks around the capital, he mentions the First Step Clan, a highly respected elite group. They are currently conducting interviews in a bar with the aim of recruiting new members. Kai takes the opportunity to explain the importance of clans. They function as societies where members benefit from each other. He points out that although a hunter can reach a certain level alone, it is crucial to join a good group in order to grow stronger and progress. Regretting his own situation, Kai reveals that he still hasn't managed to join a group. Suddenly, a girl approaches, asking if he is also looking for a clan. She introduces herself as Huda Rubek and says that she has just been promoted to level 3. Kai introduces himself as Cry Andre, but doesn't greet her, leaving Huda with her hand out. Ignoring the gesture, Huda comments on the Vault of the White Wolf's Nest, a mission she tried to complete and which brought her many challenges. Huda has decided to join a group to advance as a hunter. In the middle of the conversation, however, she is interrupted by a man who ridicules her, saying that the capital is no place for weak hunters like her, and that being at level 3 means nothing. Huda corrects him, saying that the group doesn't require a minimum level to apply for vacancies. When she realizes that he won't leave her alone, Huda challenges him to a fight. At that moment, 2 representatives of the group notice the confusion in the queue and ask them both to calm down. Otherwise, they will lose their chance to join the clan. They remind them that hunters should never draw their weapons in public, as Huda did. After the incident, they finally enter the bar where the selection of hunters takes place. Huda is impressed by the caliber of the hunters around her, as it's her first time there. Cry comments that it's the 5th time he's been there. Observing the hunters, Huda notices a specific group and asks who they are. Cry explains that they are the Ark Brave, also known as the Children of the Holy Spirit, the strongest group present. They managed to complete a level 7 vault with only 6 members and are considered to be of the most elite. The group's leader, Ark Roden, is a legendary figure, and any hunter he accepts into his group is destined for success. However, Cry reveals that he has never seen Ark accept new members at events like this. In the middle of the conversation, the man from before interrupts them again. He notices an empty table at the event, and Greg explains that this is the table of the group that founded the First Step Clan, known as Strike or Strange Grief. Years ago, they arrived in the capital and, being full of talent, have become one of the most respected groups. Cry comments that this is the group of his childhood friends, and Greg adds that they are accepting new members, which explains the great movement in the place. Suddenly, a red-haired boy starts shouting, asking to be accepted into the Strange Grief. Tino, a huntress, approaches to put him in his place, saying that she is the one who deserves to be in the group. The bar becomes agitated, with everyone pushing aside tables and chairs to watch the confrontation. After all, the fewer the candidates, the better. Seeing the confusion about to begin, Cry decides to discreetly leave the bar, but before he can escape, Tino notices him and approaches him suspiciously, calling him Master. At that moment, Ark Rodan also notices Cry and reveals that he is actually the clan master and leader of the Strange Grief. Surprised, Cry tells more of his story, saying that years ago, when his group arrived in the capital, they completed treasure chests for beginners in record time. However, Cry always felt inferior to the other 5 members, believing that he was an ordinary hunter and that if he continued with them, he would end up hindering the group. Despite all his friends being incredible and never complaining about his level, Cry decides to leave the group on his own. However, the boys don't seem to understand his decision, and Mills suggests that Cry take over the leadership of the group, since they don't have a leader yet. Cry becomes even more confused, realizing that his friends didn't even hear what he said about leaving the group. Over the years, he ended up becoming the leader unintentionally, and since then, he has always thought about retiring from the hunting life as soon as possible. Back in the present, Greg and Huda are still shocked to discover that the young man is the leader of First Step. Just then, Ark-Ross approaches Cry to mock him, mentioning that he's often late because he's too sleepy. Tino quickly intervenes to defend his master. Cry tries to explain himself, saying that he simply overslept and didn't have time to get ready properly, but he still feels that no one is listening to him, including the other hunters and Ark-Ross. Seeing Ark repeatedly disrespect Cry, Tino asks Cry to expel him from the clan, but Ark ignores the request. Instead, he asks if Cry has found any potential new members yet. Cry then asks if Ark would accept a recommendation, to which Ark replies that he would trust any hunter Cry suggests, as he has great confidence in him. Tino is excited about the possibility of being chosen, as she was more than ready to join the group. Meanwhile, Gilbert begins to draw attention to himself, eager to be chosen for the strange grief. Upon analyzing the boy, Cry realizes that he wouldn't be much help in his current state, but believes that, with the right training, Gilbert could be polished. However, Cry begins to doubt his own experience in evaluating someone, admitting that any suggestion he makes would be pure luck. Nevertheless, Cry decides to recommend Gilbert. Before recommending him, Cry explains to the boy that the most important trait in a hunter is strength, because without it, the whole group could be in danger. He challenges Gilbert to show that he has the ability to not lose, stating that only on this condition would he appoint him to Ark-Rodan. Cry then mentions that he has never lost a fight, but quickly thinks to himself that this is easy to say, since he has never been in a real battle. To test the hunters, Cry makes an announcement. He will recommend to Ark-Brave whoever manages to get the treasure in his hand. He throws a ring into the middle of the hunters, causing a frantic scramble for the item. The ring ends up falling into Gilbert's lap, but Tino acts quickly, kicking the boy in the face and throwing him away. However, she also loses the ring. While everyone is distracted looking for the ring, Cry takes the opportunity to leave discreetly and go home. The next day, he reads in the papers about the riot that took place at the Ark-Brave recruitment drive, with the entire bar exploding during the melee. Fortunately, no civilians were hurt, but Ava Renfield, the clan's deputy headmistress, informs him that the Adventurers Association wants to talk about what happened. As for Ark, Eva comments that he just laughed when he read the article. On hearing this, Cry asks Ava to put the repair of the bar on Ark's bill, and also leaves the responsibility of dealing with the association to Ark. However, Ava informs him that the association wants to talk specifically to Cry, and he reluctantly decides to go. Cry knew that if he didn't go to the meeting place, Lieutenant Gark would probably come after him. So he asked to go with an escort, fearing that he would be attacked, but Eva reassured him that no one would do anything against him at that moment. Determined, Cry heads for the scene and apologizes for all the trouble he's caused. Eva hurriedly tries to calm Cry down, but he continues to apologize, explaining that only the building was destroyed, but the people were unharmed. Gark then explains that, despite not having received an official complaint, the First Step clan needs to set an example for the other hunters. That's why he can't just let Cry get away with this. Realizing that he will have to face the consequences, Cry knows that he will be forced to do one of the Adventurers Association's boring jobs, known as punishments. Trying to escape the situation, Cry tries to convince Gark that the incident wasn't that serious. However, Gark insists that he choose a punishment straight away. Cry, without much choice, chooses a level 3 mission called Bone Collection. When he leaves, Gart comments to his secretary that Cry, despite everything, still has the same energy as always, and that he has chosen one of the most dangerous missions, regardless of the consequences. Meanwhile, Cry meets Tino and discovers that she was the one who found the ring he threw in the previous confusion. Cry invites her to help with a job for the Adventurers Association, but Tino immediately runs away when he hears the invitation. Then Cry, using one of his tracking treasures, finds her again. Tino, annoyed, complains that she would have liked to have been taken for an ice cream, but Cry reassures her that she won't have to go on the mission alone. Cry explains that she will form a group with Huda to complete the level 3 mission, watching everything with a sadistic smile. Cry, who is reminiscent of the protagonist of Eminence in Shadow, or a true master of deception. In a flashback, Cry recalls his first days as a hunter in the capital with his childhood friends. Soon after arriving, he expresses his concerns, saying that he feels he is a burden to the group, and that perhaps he should go home. Luke, one of his companions, reprimands him, saying that he is worrying too much about something trivial. To show his confidence, Luke steps forward and kicks in the guild doors, raising his sword and challenging the best swordsman in the place to come forward. Elle, another member of the group, joins Luke's side, proclaiming herself to be the best thief in the world, and announcing that they are there to register as treasure hunters. During the conversation, Luke says that a man's true strength lies in his usefulness, and not in the weapon he wields. That's why he uses a wooden sword, which he says makes him the strongest swordsman of all. Meanwhile, Cry continues with the group's registration procedure until the receptionist asks him to choose a name for the group. Realizing that they hadn't thought of it yet, Cray sees an opportunity to get rid of the burden and proposes a strange and ridiculous name on purpose: Strange Griff. He hopes that with such a weird name, people won't take the group seriously, making it easier for them to leave. However, his companions surprise Cry by praising the name he has given them, trying to motivate him to stay in the group. Even with this peculiar name, the Strange Griff group achieves great success, reigning in the golden age of treasure hunters and gaining prominence, including Cry, who becomes a valuable member. Back in the present, Greg is still incredulous and wonders if Cry really is the leader of the Footprints clan. The people around them begin to praise him, calling him 1,000 Tricks, a very famous level 8 hunter. Tino, for his part, asks everyone to kneel before the master, now that they know who he really is. Cray, a little uncomfortable, asks her not to exaggerate too much, explaining the origin of the nickname 1,000 Tricks. Cray explains that 1,000 Tricks was the second nickname he received as a leader of the Strange Griff clan. Leaders who stand out end up winning special titles from the association and become idols. On hearing this, Gilbert expresses incredulity, saying that Cry couldn't possibly be 1,000 Tricks, as he doesn't look like someone who trains that much. Tino gets angry and teases the boy, but is quickly reprimanded by Cry. Even so, she makes it clear that she can't imagine working alongside Gilbert, since he only talks and doesn't really act. Gilbert, for his part, continues to challenge Cry, saying he doesn't believe he's level 8. Greg intervenes, calling Gilbert an idiot for trying to start a fight he can't sustain. Cray, however, ignores the boy, leaving him free to think what he wants, and asks Greg and Huda to help with the mission. He also suggests that Tino seek help from the clan if necessary. When he has finished what he has to do, Cry prepares to leave, but Gilbert challenges him again, proposing a fight and saying that if Cry defeats him, he will join the mission. Cry accepts the challenge, but asks Tino to fight in his place. As they come face to face, Gilbert remembers the mistake he made on the day of the ring, but promises he won't make the same mistake again, declaring that he will fight with everything this time. Tino, for his part, warns her that even though he is level 4, he will not defeat her so easily, making it clear that although he considers himself inferior to his master, he will not lose to Gilbert. To prove her confidence, she drops her weapons and decides to fight only with her hands. Cry observes the scene and recognizes that Tino isn't entirely wrong, as she really does seem to be stronger than Gilbert. However, he mentions that the real problem is the Purgatory Blade that Gilbert carries. Feeling underestimated, Gilbert decides to fight without his weapon too. As the fight begins, Tino surprises everyone by turning Gilbert into a bird with a sharp kick to the face. Gilbert, furious, tries to counterattack, but Tino overpowers him, pinning his arms and warning him not to disrespect his master again if he doesn't want to feel any more pain. Finally, she defeats Gilbert with a single blow, impressing everyone with the strength of the strange Griff clan. At that moment, Gilbert remembers his past, when he trained hard to become a hunter. Ever since he was a child, he had beaten adults at swordsmanship, which motivated him to continue his training intensely. On arriving in the capital, Gilbert formed a group and began to conquer various treasure chests, gaining confidence to the point where he believed that no one could defeat him. However, seeing that he was still willing to fight, Tino suggested that he use his sword. Gilbert refuses at first, but soon admits that in a real battle, Tino would easily defeat him. Cry observes the situation and realizes that Gilbert has probably left his old group because of the difference in strength between them. On hearing this, Gilbert asks how Cry knows this. Cry replies that he's been through the same thing, but Gilbert misinterprets everything, believing that Cray is the strongest of the group and is staying with them out of generosity, supporting weaker people. When Cry examines Gilbert's sword, he is excited to test the blade and finds that it is a good weapon, albeit simple. Seeing the flames emanating from it, Gilbert is surprised, as he had never managed to awaken the full power of the Blade of Purgatory, even though he owned it. As they continue their journey, Cry explains that mana is the fundamental substance of the world, and that treasure chests are phenomena that occur when spirit lines and other forces condense mana, manifesting alternative worlds based on memories extracted from the world's core. He mentions that the White Wolf's Nest is one of these vaults, originally inhabited by lupine monsters called Silvermund. This species became extinct due to rampant hunting for their fur, which resulted in the creation of a vault in this location, along with a bloody wolf ghost. As he describes all this, Cry begins to feel a chill run down his spine, as he understands that the place was generated from the vengeful feelings of the extinct race of wolves. After hearing Cry's explanation about the level 3 safe and its security, being in 4 people, Evo changes the subject and comments on the impressive display of skill he gave with Gilbert's sword. Cray, however, plays it down, saying that the Purgatory Blade is easy to handle, considering that Gilbert himself was able to use it without much practice. Cry then ponders buying the boy's sword, but Evo reminds him that he already has several relics and that it would be a waste to acquire another one. In addition, she mentions the loan he had already taken out from Citra, warning him to be more cautious. After this conversation, Cry meets up with his friends, one of whom mentions a ghost that appeared on the road north, destroying an entire caravan, even with an escort. The Knights of the Third Order began recruiting people to hunt the creature, which, according to witnesses, looked like a wolf. This leads them to believe that the ghost came from the White Wolf's Nest. Upon hearing this, Cry is in denial, trying to convince himself that it's all just speculation and that Tino will be fine. However, his friend comments that the strength of the White Wolf's Nest ghost has increased unexpectedly, to the point where they are considering raising the level of the vault. Cry's concern grows, especially when he discovers that a high-level wizard and his partners have also disappeared in the area. Disguising his concern, he tells his friends that he sent Tino there, only to intensify his training. After the conversation, Cray decides to go out for a breather and calms down, telling himself that Gilbert is a skilled swordsman and that, with the Blade of Purgatory in hand, he'll be fine. However, he worries when he remembers that the boy was carrying the sword after Cry used it. Meanwhile, Tino and his group realize that the place is really dangerous. Tino believes that everything has been calculated by Cry, who must have a plan in mind to send them there. However, Greg disagrees with this deduction and reminds Tino that they only met yesterday, showing that he doesn't fully trust Cry and his intentions. Cray begins to realize that he has sent his group on a mission without planning properly, With the time running out, he realizes that there's no longer any way to call for help and decides to go after them alone. Meanwhile, Tino and the other members of the group come across a giant ghost in the shape of a wolf, who surprises them by being equipped with armor and a sword. Back in the city, Cry gathers some specific relics that he believes are necessary and puts them in a giant sack, preparing to go to meet his allies. On the way, he is confronted by Ava, who questions what he is doing with that huge sack. Cray, trying to disguise himself, makes up an excuse, claiming that he's just going out for a walk. Ava, however, quickly realizes that he is going after Tino and the group. Nevertheless, Cry insists that he is only going out to explore and, without further ado, activates a relic that allows flight, leaving Ava behind. As she watches Cry walk away, she remembers one major flaw with this relic. Although it allows a person to take off and continue gliding, there is no method of pausing or landing safely. Ava wonders how Cry intends to solve this. Meanwhile, in the past, a week after the Strang GFF began operations in Zebru's capital, Cry remembers a conversation in a tavern with her childhood friends. One of the girls mentioned how they had found a Cyclops in a level 1 vault, which completely surprised her. After all, Cyclopses are monsters usually found at much higher levels, such as 4. Overhearing the conversation, a drunken man approached and, not believing what he was hearing, said that a creature of that level would never appear in a goblin cave. Curious, he began to ask a series of questions about Cyclops, until one of the girls revealed her handbag, showing Cyclops' eye as proof. When the man saw it, he was startled and shouted. Back in the present, Huda, also in shock at the creature they are facing, comments that the monster seems too strong to be in a level 3 vault. He warns Greg about the situation. Greg, for his part, wonders why Gilbert's sword isn't on fire. Gilbert then explains that the Sword of Purgatory has run out of mana, and that since Cry used it to unleash a huge fire attack, it has been depleted. Since Gilbert can't recharge the sword himself, it's currently unusable. Ruda, realizing the seriousness of the situation, suggests that Gilbert retreat. Meanwhile, Greed, analyzing the chaotic environment, deduces that the group they came to rescue may already be dead, given the dangerous state of the place. Tino then decides to change the plan, even though the group hasn't entered the vault yet. On hearing what Greg says, she disagrees, believing that the people are still alive. Tino fully trusts her master, who always knows what he's doing, and believes that depleting the Purgatory Sword's mana was part of his plan. She then suggests that Gilbert not rely so heavily on the relics. The group continues to advance, but they soon come across unusual wolves, armed with bows and even firearms. Greg notes that it's not just that strong wolf they encountered earlier, but that all the wolves there are equally powerful. Tino explains that the White Wolf's Nest was made to accommodate the Silver Moon Wolves, who are the original inhabitants of the place. However, when she notices how much the wolves have grown, she deduces that they are less agile, making them easy prey. Determined to attack head-on, Gilbert believes it will be more advantageous for the group. Even without mana, the Sword of Purgatory is still much more powerful than an ordinary sword. On hearing this, Tino calls him an idiot, but he insists on his strategy. Tino, as the leader, reinforces that her priority is to make sure that everyone comes back alive, since that's the least her master expects of her. Determined, she advances together with Huda, the two most agile of the group, to attack the wolves directly. Meanwhile, Tino asks the rest of the group to attack the rear as soon as they start the fight. At the same time, Cry continues to make his way towards the group, hoping that at least Tino is okay, without caring too much about the others, as long as Tino manages to save himself, even if he uses the rest of the group as a shield. With Tino's coordination, the group manages to defeat the wolves quickly, because unlike them, the wolves don't have a good sense of cooperation and fight in a disorganized and vulnerable way. After the victory, the group moves on and soon comes across another pack of wolves, ready for the next challenge. As soon as the wolves appear, Gilbert charges at them without hesitation. Tino observes that despite not being the most skilled, he is determined and competent in battle. Greg, for his part, also stands out for his ability to collaborate with others, thanks to his vast experience as an adventurer. Huda, on the other hand, although she doesn't make flashy moves, is crucial when it comes to locating enemies with precision, allowing the group to advance efficiently. If it weren't for her, Tino wouldn't be able to concentrate solely on combat. As he continues to fight, Tino reflects on his master's choice. He was right all along, as he thought about each member carefully, ensuring that the group functioned in the best possible way. During the fight, Gilbert remembers his past, when he fought with his old team, demanding that they be more determined. One of the members explained that they couldn't keep up with him, and frustrated, Gilbert ended up leaving the team. At the time, he didn't recognize his colleagues' efforts, he just saw the growing power gap between them. Now, he regrets not having valued his friend's efforts, and regrets his impetuous attitude. After defeating the wolves, the group continues to advance, reaching a larger area. Tino touches the wall and feels the presence of something nearby. She deduces that it's the boss of the place. Greg, worried, asks if they shouldn't run away, but Tino is firm. They've come this far without any injuries, so she believes they can face the challenge. She stresses that completely safe missions don't lead to growth. Sometimes it's necessary to take risks in order to evolve as adventurers. Greg, although worried, admits that Tino has a point. He always freezes in front of monsters he finds impossible to beat because of the memories of the friends he has lost. Tino realizes that even this was part of her master's plan, Cry. She believes that he sent Greg on this very mission in order to make him grow as a hunter. For Tino, her master is almost like a god, and she says with conviction that nothing in the group was done by chance. Everything followed Cry's infallible plan. On hearing this, Huda asks why Cry chose her to be part of that group. Tino jokingly suggests that he may have chosen her because he liked her attributes, but she quickly puts these matters aside and moves on, determined to find the boss as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Cry continues to look for them, but still can't find them. He begins to think that he may have arrived too late. When he finally enters the wolves' lair, he injures himself by crashing into a wall, as his relic has no brakes. Nevertheless, he tells Tino's group about his arrival. Finally, the group finds the boss of the place, and the battle begins. Everyone works together, cooperating efficiently. During the fight, Tino observes Huda and realizes that the girl fights with impressive courage, showing no fear. This makes her an incredible hunter in Tino's eyes. Meanwhile, Greg suffers an unexpected blow and his sword breaks in half, leaving him completely vulnerable to the enemy. Tino, quick and precise, saves him by striking the giant wolf directly in the head, eliminating it with a single attack. After the fight, Greg laments the fate of his broken sword, but Gilbert reminds him to be grateful for being alive. The group barely has time to relax when, as they advance a little further, they come across a horde of other giant wolves, identical to the one they have just defeated. Seeing this, Tino begins to question his master's plans, admitting that this second wave of enemies is overkill. She decides to retreat and tries to lead the group down a passage to the right, but before they can do anything, one of the giant wolves blocks the exit, preventing their escape. At this point, Gilbert and Greg make a brave decision. They offer to act as bait, allowing Huda and Tino to escape. They know it's better to sacrifice a few than to risk everyone dying out there. Upon hearing Gilbert and Greg's words about sacrifice, Tino initially questions whether this is what her master really wanted. However, she quickly reaffirms her decision, saying that no one there will sacrifice themselves. She asks everyone to support her, as she plans to focus her attacks on the wolves' eyes. With this strategy, one of the wolves begins to struggle violently and accidentally hits Gilbert, who was advancing without caution. Tino loses hope, feeling that this could be the end of one of them. However, in the midst of the chaos, Cry finally appears, falling directly on top of the giant wolf and knocking him down with the impact. The other wolves try to attack Cray, but he reacts quickly, hitting one of the wolves with his safety ring. To everyone's surprise, the monster gets up as if the attack had had no effect. Without hesitating, Cry uses another relic, creating a cloud of smoke in the area. Taking advantage of the confusion, he orders everyone to run as fast as possible. While everyone is running away, Tino notices that Huda is lagging behind, running with difficulty. Worried, Cry hurries the group along, but Huda explains that she's injured and can't keep up. When he realizes how serious Huda's situation is, Cry apologizes for not noticing her before. At that moment, Tino remembers the day he met Cry. She had been captured by two men in the street who were planning to sell her into slavery. In desperation, Tino cried and cried out for help until Cray and the other members of the STR Griffin Guild showed up to save her. When she asked the name of her savior, Cray preferred to remain silent, as he didn't consider himself important enough to say his name, even if, for the others, he was someone of great value. After that event, Tino became a big fan of Cry and the STR Griff Guild ever since she was rescued, even calling him God at the time. Back in the present, Greg and Gilbert thank Cry for saving them, but Tino, with a sad look on her face, regrets not having been able to carry out the mission alone. Huda intervenes in Tino's defense, pointing out that she did her best. If it hadn't been for Tino's leadership, the group would already be dead. Cry, for his part, approaches and apologizes for putting them through that. He also acknowledges Tino's efforts by observing her injuries and healing her with one of his relics. Greg then mentions the bosses they left alive at the site, but Cry interrupts, saying that the focus now should be on getting out of the White Wolf's nest as quickly as possible. The problem is that as they walk away, Cry realizes that he has no idea where the exit is. Even so, he tries to keep his composure, and everyone continues to follow his lead without realizing that he too is lost. This situation ends up being hilarious, with Cry trying to disguise his lack of direction while the group blindly trusts him. Cry is carried away by memories of the past, recalling a time when his friends were admiring his relics. Everyone was impressed by the rare items he owned. Cry explained that he usually keeps all the relics he buys. During this conversation, he remembers a promise he made to Citre, to give her a relic that matches her. Meanwhile, Luke, feeling left out, asks if Cry is also planning to give something to the other team members. Ciri ends up picking up a peculiar relic, but has no idea what it is. Cry then clarifies that it is a magic pouch, an item capable of storing various objects. Upon hearing this, Sutina deduces that the bag must be expensive, but Cry reveals that the opposite is true, as it is much cheaper than everyone thinks. The trick? It can only hold chocolates, making it an almost useless item. Meanwhile, Liz finds a bracelet among the relics, and as soon as she puts it on her wrist, begins to lose her balance and fall. Cry explains that this is the Ring of the Labyrinth, a relic that distorts the wearer's sense of space, causing confusion. Luke, for his part, discovers a sword and admires it, but Cry quickly puts an end to his excitement, revealing that it is a cursed sword. When he touches it, Luke starts acting out of control, as if he wants to attack everyone around him. Cray comments that Luke already acts this way naturally, so the sword doesn't make much difference to him. Since then, all these dangerous relics have been turned into training items for Luke and Liz, since they have no practical use. Back in the present, in the labyrinth of the White Wolf's nest, Cry explains that the place is made up of narrow corridors that seem to multiply endlessly, leaving everyone confused and feeling that they are always in the same place. Everyone's geographical perception is impaired, and Cry begins to feel a certain discomfort at leading the way. As the rogues in the group are Tino and Ruda, he observes the two and notices that Tino doesn't even look at him, which makes him think that she must be upset at having been sent on a mission above her level. Cry feels that it would be better to apologize on his knees to prevent the situation from getting worse. Before he can do so, Gilbert interrupts, asking if they really are heading for the exit. Cry replies that they are. although he admits that he doesn't know where the exit is. Tino then draws Gilbert's attention and reveals that discovering the Master's plans is part of the training. She already knew that they weren't heading for the exit, but she understood that this was the point of the exercise, to learn how to solve challenging situations. Uda asks where exactly they are going, but Cry remains silent, since even he doesn't know the answer. Feeling the pressure of everyone leaning on him, Cry decides to change direction and take an alternative route. On the way, Greg begins to despair, but Tino and Uda reassure him, reminding him that everything is under Cry's control. While following this new route, the group comes across wounded hunters in the distance. Cry is surprised that they managed to spot the hunters from so far away. When they get closer, Cry realizes that they are the same hunters they were looking to rescue. The leader of the group introduces himself as Rudolph from the VS Guild and thanks them for coming to rescue them. Tino, however, says that all the gratitude should go to Cry, since he was the one who led them there. Cry tries to explain that the discovery was just a coincidence, but everyone interprets his modesty as another way of hiding his true genius. Seeing that everyone was starving, he takes chocolates from his magic bag and distributes them to the group, calming them down and restoring their energy. Tino, amazed, comments that as well as saving them, Cry found the lost group with ease and even managed to keep everyone calm at a critical moment. For her, he's practically a god. Meanwhile, Greg talks to Rudolph and mentions that he suspected a mistake when he heard that they were level 5. Rudolph, surprised, explains that he and his group hadn't expected to find such strong monsters either. Gilbert then admits that the Wolf Riders are really powerful, but it's still hard to believe that a level 5 group was defeated by such a monster. Rudolph, upon hearing the description of the monster they faced, clarifies that the enemy they faced was different, an incarnation of Rancor, a small ghost with its face covered by a skull. He suggests that this creature is a manifestation of the curse of the Silver Moon, which remained in that place after the wolves were exterminated by the humans. According to him, the accumulated hatred was transformed into this being of immense power, a theory that seems to be the only plausible explanation for the existence of such a frightening force. Rudolph reveals that despite their initial confidence, his group didn't stand a chance against the ghost, and believes him to be on the same level as the legendary First Sword, the greatest swordsman in the capital. Hearing this comparison, Cry remembers that this warrior had a formal education in the sword and mastered the sacred blade, learning various combat styles along the way. Cry describes Luke as a true madman, someone capable of taking down any enemy using just a simple wooden sword. He then reveals that the famous Thousand Swords is actually one of his childhood friends, and also a member of the Strage, none other than Luke himself. Upon hearing this, Cry believes that they are exaggerating by comparing the ghost to Luke's level. After all, if a creature of this caliber really existed, Luke would have gone after it a long time ago to put an end to the threat. Despite this confidence, Cry knows that Tino isn't strong enough to defeat this ghost. Rudolph explains that, during the confrontation, the ghost seemed to be just toying with them, but he fears that the next time the situation will be different, and the creature will eliminate them for real. Upon hearing this, Uda asks Cry what he intends to do. Cry remains silent, pondering the complicated situation. Finally, he suggests that they all escape before encountering the creature again, and hands over responsibility for the mission to Tino, instructing everyone to follow his orders. On hearing this responsibility being passed on to her, Tino begins to belittle herself, saying that she is insignificant compared to him. Cry, however, responds with the same excuse as always, saying that it is all part of his training. Halfway through the journey, Rudolph thanks her again for her help, and offers to act as a shield for the group if the ghost reappears, guaranteeing at least a little time during the battle. Tino, for his part, assures everyone that everything will be fine now that they are with their master, Cry. However, he feels the weight of this trust being placed on him and believes that this will only make the situation even more complicated. Even so, he is willing to act as a shield for the group, as he sees no other alternative. Suddenly, everyone starts to see the monsters approaching again. Cry quickly checks his amulets of protection and realizes that he only has 5 left. What's more, his attack items won't be enough to ward off the enemies. To make matters worse, his Citra Slime, along with the sword that was strapped to his waist, have also disappeared. Faced with so many obstacles, Cry believes that this is definitely the end for all of them. Meanwhile, Tino realizes that the enemy is getting closer, and this time it seems to be an incredibly powerful and frightening monster. Rudolph immediately recognizes the enemy and confirms that this is the ghost he mentioned earlier. Cry then stands in front of Tino and asks her and Amanda to stay back, as the threat is now really serious. He begins to think of a strategy and decides to use the Nighthawk to transform himself into a human missile. After all, even if he dies once, Cry can still launch a surprise attack against the ghost. As the enemy approaches, everyone begins to feel afraid and lose hope. But suddenly, they notice the presence of a second ghost next to the first, making the situation even more desperate. Tino, frightened, starts pulling at Cry's shirt, begging for help. Just then, the second ghost reveals that it's actually Liz in disguise. She immediately attacks the real ghost and throws it away. Cry, surprised, asks Liz to take off that scary mask. As soon as she reveals her face, Liz starts complaining about the situation and, without wasting any time, goes after Tino, scolding her for not being able to carry out her mission on her own. During the lecture, Gilbert tries to talk to Liz, but she loses patience and punches him, throwing him against the wall. She then resumes her scolding of Tino, asking what is missing for her to become stronger, and points out that her own reputation is at risk, as everyone will think that Liz has failed to train Tino. Realizing that Liz was overstepping her bounds, Cry tries to calm the situation by praising Tino for his efforts on the mission. However, Liz, still angry, turns to the enemy and continues to complain, saying that she is being underestimated because of Tino's incompetence. Meanwhile, another monster starts attacking the group with a machine gun. Liz, however, manages to catch each of the projectiles in the air, forming a square around her. When she realizes that this was the reason for Tino's fear, Liz gets even angrier, saying that it wasn't that dangerous. Without hesitation, she lunges at the first enemy and eliminates him with a clean blow. The ghost then draws his weapon and tries to attack her too, but Liz holds his sword with just 2 fingers, deflecting his attacks with ease. She begins to explain to Tino in a harsh tone how to defeat this type of enemy, sparing no words and even cursing Tino's family, which makes her cry. Having finished defeating the ghost, Liz returns to Cry's arms, exhausted but satisfied. The next day, Gilbert decides to hand over the Sword of Purgatory to Cry, explaining that he wants to start his journey again from scratch until he reaches the same level as Liz. But when he hears this, everyone around him suggests that he give up, as they consider this goal to be practically impossible. Recalling a conversation with Citri Smart, Cry remembers the slime he received from the girl, who believed that leaving it with him would be the safest choice. Cry introduces Citri as an alchemist and member of the Stride. Although she has a peculiar manner, she is part of the capital's Institute of Science and is known as the brain of the Stride. With so many achievements, Citri has become the most renowned alchemist and is called a prodigy. Cry remembers how Cry often used him as a guinea pig in experiments. On top of the slime she gave him, Cry begins to caress it, until Citri warns him to be careful. If he happens to drop the slime, it could destroy the entire capital. She says that the slime is a little dangerous. But Cry realizes that it's actually super dangerous. Back in the present, while returning home, Cry realizes that he has lost the slime, which sends him into a panic. He searches everywhere, but ends up sitting on his bed without finding the slime. When he thinks about it, he remembers that when he opened the capsule in the White Wolf's nest, the container was empty. So he assumes that Citri gave him the empty container just to play a trick on him. Meanwhile, Greg and the others continue to fight in the vaults and notice that the level of ghosts has increased considerably in recent weeks. Greg explains that investigating anomalies in the treasure vault is vital for the kingdom and informs them that Cry is also investigating these occurrences. The next day, Cry wakes up looking like a zombie because he didn't sleep well the night before. He bumps into Eva, who asks him to prepare a detailed report on the White Wolf's nest. With the request coming at the worst possible time, Cry tries to push this responsibility onto Tino, since she was the leader of the operation. He then asks Eva to instruct Tino to make the report, justifying the fact that he only arrived on the scene at the end of the mission. Eva, however, informs him that Tino is in training with Liz, which makes Cry change the subject, asking if there has been any unrest in the capital. On hearing this suspicious question, Eva begins to worry, but Cry tells her not to worry, saying that if nothing has happened so far, nothing probably will. Determined, he rushes off to see how Tino is doing in training. Eva, on the other hand, remains pensive about what she has heard, curious to know what is really going on in the capital. Meanwhile, Cry meets Vanga, introducing him as the leader of the Obsidian Cross. Vanga comments on Tino's training and suggests that they get the girl out of the room as soon as possible before she ends up dying. Cray, smiling, says that people don't usually die as easily as they think. However, as soon as he opens the door, he sees Tino lying on the floor. Liz, whispering, encourages Tino to get up, as long as she hasn't reached her limit yet. Observing the scene, Liz concludes that Tino is just playing the weakling because she believes that Liz wouldn't have the courage to seriously hurt her. Liz then corrects this impression, saying that she would have no problem killing her. She asks Tino if she really has any reason to stay alive, but seeing that the girl doesn't answer, Liz lifts her leg to deliver the final blow. Tino, already prepared for the worst, accepts her fate. Seeing the situation, Cry interrupts the training and asks them to call it a night. Liz explains that she is only training Tino and comments that, despite being weak, the girl has a lot of talent. Cry then suggests that they take a break, as Tino seems to have reached her limit. Despite Liz's insistence on continuing, she decides to comply with the Cry's request and take a break. During their conversation, Tino suddenly grabs hold of Liz's leg, insisting that she is still able to move. Liz realizes that Tino only got up when she saw Cry, which makes her suspicious that she was just pretending to be tired. Determined to continue training, Liz ignores Cry's presence. He, in turn, leaves the room, allowing the two to continue their extreme training. Observing this attitude, Ven comments, calling Cry crazy. Even though he disagrees with the rigor of the training, Ven believes that it will strengthen Tino. He then changes the subject, mentioning that the route to the north has been blocked, which has caused even more ghosts to appear. They decide to investigate the reason for this phenomenon. Hearing this, Cry remembers the reports of travelers being attacked by ghosts in the White Wolf's nest. Upon reflection, he recognizes that the place seemed strange from the start and believes that this was the reason for Gark's urgency to see him. Regretting the absence of Ark, who is a strong and intelligent leader, Cry believes that everyone would be more confident with Ark present, as he has never disappointed as a leader or fighter. However, while Ark is not around, Cry looks for alternatives to buy time. He decides to send the Obsidian Cross to investigate Gark, assigning the group to deal with the situation. Then, Cry suggests that Ven go on a mission for the Association, since the training hall won't be used. Deciding to leave, he asks them to let Gark know that he's too busy for a meeting. Meanwhile, Gark receives yet another report on the White Wolf's nest, mentioning that there has been no change in the energy lines or the concentration of mana there. This leads him to wonder what could be causing the anomalies in the treasure chest, and he decides that he needs to talk to Cry as soon as possible. Gark's assistant informs him that Cry is too busy to see him. Determined, Gark decides to meet him the next morning, certain that Cry knows more than he's letting on. Gark remembers that it had been a long time since Cry had been interested in safes, until he suddenly focused on the White Wolf's Nest safe. For him, this is proof enough that Cry has information that he is hiding. Meanwhile, a group of mysterious men examine a mechanism in front of them and comment on the high-level hunter who has begun investigating them. They fear that the Adventurers Association will soon discover his hiding place. One of those involved addresses the leader of the operation and comments that ordinary hunters would never understand the great work planned by the Master of the Magi. But with the investigation underway, the hunters won't leave until they understand the source of the problem. The Master Magician explains that the mechanism uses the vast power of the energy lines. However, storing this object has caused disturbances in the treasure chests. If the experiment is successful, he will be able to prove his theory, making it possible to create new treasure chests at any time. The project members are undecided about the next steps, as moving the experiment to another location would mean starting all over again. He mentions that Sophia, who is on vacation, will be back soon and can resolve this impasse quickly. Until then, he orders them to gather more information. Meanwhile, Cry wakes up from a nightmare in which he sees the capital destroyed by Citri's slime. When he looks away, he sees Liz, who tells him that she will be taking a break from Tino's training that day. As he leaves the room, Cry runs into Gark, who wants to settle any unfinished business, but Liz intervenes, saying that Cry is busy, as they have already arranged to go out together. She reminds Gark that he depends too much on Cry, and encourages him to learn to solve his own problems on his own. On hearing this, Gark asks Liz to put herself in his place, but she nonchalantly accuses him of getting in the way of their meeting. She then tries to attack him. Gark defends himself, and warns her that even someone as kind as him has his limits. Cry realizes that something isn't right and decides to leave, taking Kana upstairs for tea. Over tea, he reads the report that Gark received the night before and discovers that there are no problems with the energy lines. Kana asks if he noticed anything unusual while he was in the White Wolf's Nest, but Cry replies that he didn't see anything special. He's worried about another issue, but decides not to mention it, since telling him that he's lost a dangerous slime capable of destroying the capital doesn't seem appropriate right now. At the end of the conversation, Cry returns to Liz and interrupts her fight with Gark. The two stop immediately and head off to the meeting they had planned earlier. On the way, Liz teases Gark, saying that his strength has diminished with age. Cry, hearing this, suggests that she shouldn't use herself as a benchmark to measure the strength of others, pointing out that, unlike her, Gark is still active. Liz insists that, with his current strength, Gark would never get past the Palace of the Night, where the most powerful ghosts appear to be at level 8. During the conversation, Liz asks Cry to hold her things and advances on a man, accusing him of having stared at them and followed them for too long. Cray asks her to let him go, and the man runs away terrified, and as he hides, he is surprised that Liz noticed him from that distance. He is impressed by the ability of the Master of 1,000 Tricks to perceive his actions so discreetly. Meanwhile, a girl comes up to the mysterious organization and introduces herself, wanting to join the group. When he hears about it, Gark bangs on the table, complaining about Cry's attitude and calling him a scumbag for always giving the same excuse to avoid meeting him. He then asks Sven to tell him what's going on, but Sven regrets not being able to help his superior. Gark, for his part, asks Sven and his team to accept a mission to investigate what is happening in the White Wolf's Nest. Meanwhile, Liz continues to cling to Cry, interpreting their walk as a romantic date. Cray, noticing this, explains that they are definitely not on a date. After all, they are in the most dangerous area of the capital, which would make it impossible to relax as if it were an ordinary date. As they walk along, two men observe Liz from afar, wondering what the broken shadow is doing there. Liz, curious, asks Cry if he has any business in the area. Crye confirms, explaining that several people have disappeared in the area. Although this type of disappearance is not uncommon in outlying areas, he says that they would face serious problems if the slime were really attacking people. Deciding to take a break from work, Crye takes Liz to an ice cream parlor to relax. However, the same man who had been watching them from afar is shocked, as he believes he had taken every precaution to avoid being followed. He begins to create theories and suspects that Liz let him go just to follow him and gain access to where he was going. Worried, he remembers that the ice cream parlor is actually one of his research centers, and no ordinary ice cream parlor. With no way out, he decides to close the establishment to avoid meeting them. But before he can do anything, he is surprised by Sophia. Soon after, Liz starts banging on the door of the ice cream parlor, saying that she knows there are people inside. When she realizes that no one will answer, she gets angry and threatens to break down the door with a punch. However, Crye calmly explains that the staff are probably off duty. However, Liz remembers that the place was only open a short time ago, which means that they closed as soon as they saw the two of them approaching. Although Crye understands what she's saying, he stands his ground to avoid upsetting the owners. In the end, he manages to convince Liz to leave, suggesting that they've probably run out of ice cream. Returning home, Crye regrets the outcome of his mission. After all, he couldn't find the city slime anywhere. Discouraged, he asks Liz when Citri will return to the Night Palace. Liz, misinterpreting his intentions, feels insulted that he is ignoring her, and replies that if he needs anything, he can ask her directly. Crye explains that he needs someone with specific knowledge of magical organisms, and Liz soon realizes that only Citri can help him with that. However, she remembers that Citri will probably be a while before he returns, as he took a lot of equipment with him. On hearing this, Crye becomes worried, but tries to calm down, telling himself that Citri will be back soon. In the middle of this conversation, Eva arrives and informs them that the members assigned to help the association investigate the White Wolf's nest have already been selected. As Eva shares the details of the operation, Crye realizes that they really are taking the situation seriously. However, he feels that as he's not involved, he won't have to worry about anything. Eva then asks him if he has any comments to make on the subject, but he replies that he doesn't. Meanwhile, the Master Magician is still worried about Crye, as he managed to locate the facility on the outskirts extremely easily, even with the facade disguised as an ice cream parlor. One of the members of the group comments, with some frustration, that Thousand Tricks' intelligence network seems much more powerful than theirs. Another member tries to calm them down, saying that there's no reason to panic, but he himself is at a loss as to how to deal with Thousand Tricks, since they barely understand what Crye really wants. The Master of the Mages gives the floor to Sophia, asking what she thinks they should do. Sophia suggests that they face the enemy, but one of the members reminds them that Crye is at level 8, which raises doubts about their chances of victory. Sophia, however, says that they shouldn't back down from any battle, regardless of the opponent. She believes that this fight will be the ideal opportunity to test the effectiveness of the defense system she has developed. After all, Crye and her allies are top-level hunters and will not be easily defeated. She guarantees that if they manage to eliminate everyone, they will succeed in preventing information about their activities from spreading. The Master of the Magi agrees, saying that now that Crye has smelled them, there is no choice but to fight. He then instructs Sophia to make her decisions as she sees fit. Meanwhile, Tino, who is in the bath, realizes that his body has completely healed thanks to Liz's care. Even after being in critical condition, Tino feels grateful that he has at least survived. On leaving home, Tino notices an unusual movement in the streets, and, on asking what's going on, discovers that some hunters, in partnership with the association, are going to investigate the White Wolf's nest. One of the hunters explains that the association is planning to send Ark to solve the problem, even though it's a level 3 vault. Given all the fuss, the hunter realizes that something is strange about this mission. However, he and the others are ready to act as Ark's replacement since Ark is absent. Tino asks if they're really ready for the challenge, and the hunter admits he's not sure. He mentions that even the Obsidian Cross has made progress, but it hasn't managed to replace the Ark completely. He therefore believes that only the Strage could fulfill this role. Still confused about what's really going on in the White Wolf's nest, Tino comes across Cry, who shows up with no idea what's going on. He asks if there's some kind of festival going on in the city, but Eva replies that there isn't. She informs him that all the excitement is about what they talked about the day before. She then mentions that she has already assembled a group of comparable strength to Ark, but if he isn't satisfied, he can make adjustments. Hearing this, Cry worries, as gathering all those hunters to work would cost a fortune. He replies to Eva that the members they have are already elite, and therefore don't need so many people on the mission with the association. For him, half the staff would be enough. As a result, everyone is even more intrigued about what might be going on in this level 3 vault. Eva tries to calm the group down and asks them to listen to what Cry has to say. He reassures them that half the hunters will be enough to handle the mission. However, despite his words, everyone still seems apprehensive. Cry then asks about the reward, and Eva informs him that Gark has secured extra funding. Knowing that the financial side is settled, Cry considers allowing the group of hunters to go in greater numbers, but Liz interrupts, offering to go alone. Cry, however, stops her, suggesting that they all go together to increase the chances of success. Eva proposes that Cry accompany them to the White Wolf's Nest vault, but he makes up an excuse, claiming to have unfinished business and asking them to go ahead. In reality, Cry is terrified and prefers to delegate leadership to the Obsidian Cross. Satisfied with avoiding direct confrontation, he gives a mischievous smile, planning to reach the vault only when the situation is under control. Meanwhile, Sven's group easily defeats the ghost on the way and continues exploring the vault. Liz, frustrated at not being able to take part, complains to Cry, but he ignores her and warns the hunters to be on the lookout if they find any slime in the White Wolf's nest. On the other side, the mages observe the movements of Cry and the hunters, who are now setting out to confront them directly. The Master Mage mentions that the highlight of his research is the mana stirring device, and that anyone who tries to hinder his progress will be crushed. One of the group expresses concern, saying that if the Strage is mobilized, they will be in serious trouble. However, Sophia assures them that their defense system is prepared to neutralize any threat. In addition, Elo points out that there are only 3 members of the Strade in the capital, including Citri. Sophia shows great anger towards Citri, considering her arch enemy, someone who must be eliminated at any cost. She informs the Master of the Magi that Citri is investigating her research based on a thesis left behind in the Empire. When she remembers that Citri got his hands on this important document, Sophia clenches her fists in anger and asks for permission to get rid of all the intruders. The Master of the Magi grants it and instructs everyone to obey Sophia as if she were acting on his behalf. Meanwhile, Sven's group begins to question why Gark has sent them on such a basic mission. Sven then receives a message from his superior, asking them to leave the site and return to the surface. When they emerge, they find other hunters who have stayed to continue the investigation. One of the men notices that Sven and his group have activated an emergency signal, even though they are underground, and deduces that Sven trusts Cry more than the evidence visible in the White Wolf's nest. Sven explains that he used the whistle out of consideration, trying to prevent them from continuing their investigation and putting themselves in danger. Meanwhile, Citri finally returns and informs everyone that she came back early because she felt a bad omen. She stresses that they need to confront this powerful enemy before it grows even stronger. She then turns to Gark to ask him for a special favor. Cry has a flashback of a past conversation with Citri. In this conversation, she suggests that he find a role that is lacking in the group, believing that this would allow everyone to have fun being hunters. Sitri, who doesn't have as much physical strength as the others, listens to Cry's suggestion to become an alchemist. Back in the present, Sitri talks about the speed at which her slime evolves, mentioning that it has an incredible ability to adapt to any environment. She tries to reassure Cry, explaining that the slime has been programmed not to attack them. Cry breathes a sigh of relief for a moment, until he realizes that Sitri mentioned that only the two of them would be safe, leaving everyone else at risk. Sitri remains focused, speculating where the slime could have hidden. She decides to check the bathroom, assuming that the slime would prefer a damp environment, but recognizing that it could be anywhere. Inspecting the drain, she comments that it's possible that the slime could have escaped through there. Cry agrees, but internally worries about the creature's destructive potential. After all, Sitri's slime is powerful enough to put the entire capital at risk, and all this while she was in her living room, living like a pet. Having finished checking the bathroom, Sitri asks Cry to leave the slime problem to her, as there is another matter she needs to discuss with him. Meanwhile, Sven gathers his teammates and asks about Liz, having heard that she was planning to go to the site. One of the guards informs them that it was Cry himself who assigned Liz and Tino to another mission, so they are both already busy. Sven sees this as a good thing, as it would be very difficult to coordinate any operation with the broken shadow around. Sven gathers the group together and asks if anyone has ever had a fight against a slime, but everyone replies that they obviously never have. Slimes are entry-level creatures. Some of the hunters even make fun of the situation, asking if they really need to fight such a trivial monster, since they often end up stepping on slimes by accident. Sven remains serious and continues the meeting, asking if anyone has brought any specific equipment to fight slimes. The hunters reply that they are armed with swords and other common weapons, which, according to them, is more than enough to deal with slimes. In addition, there are those who use magic and guarantee that they can easily defeat any slime with their skills. Observing the general lack of interest, Sven notices that everyone there considers slimes to be harmless, to the point where they don't even care much about the mission. Seeing this attitude, he asks if Cry has mentioned anything else important about the creature. One of the hunters replies that all they know is that this particular slime is not like the others. Frustrated, Sven complains that Cry always seems stingy with information, leaving them blind. While Sven is venting, one of the hunters suggests that they continue exploring and, with a dismissive laugh, says that if Sven is so afraid of slimes, he should back off and leave the problem to the others. Noticing that the other hunters are looking at him with pitying eyes, the hunter gets angry and asks why everyone is staring at him like that. Sven replies that he clearly hasn't understood the seriousness of the situation and that, in fact, no one trusts his ability to survive. Many think he'll be the first to fall. Having said that, Sven reinforces his warning. If the hunter insists on moving on, he's doing so at his own risk. Before letting him go, Sven adds ironically that he could at least try to leave some traces behind if he is killed, so that the rest can find him and avenge his death. Outraged, the hunter turns away and continues his exploration, scorning Sven and the others for believing the words of someone who isn't even there to lead them. As he continues, a young woman raises her hand, introduces herself as Talia Weem, and claims to be an alchemist. On hearing Talia's occupation, Sven is slightly surprised, as he believed that only Sitri worked as an alchemist in the clan. Talia then explains that she was with Sitri in the clan's laboratory, where they carried out research into the potential of slimes together. In the midst of their studies, Sitri developed a potion that is capable of killing slimes, and Talia has this potion in hand. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Noctis and the Tower of Acacia are finalizing their research. Noctis asks about the next steps, and one of the group begins her explanation. Back in the labyrinth, Sven organizes his groups. He orders some to take control of the inside of the labyrinth, while others take charge of the rescue. With the instructions given, Sven encourages everyone to come back alive to prove to the idiot master that this kind of work is simple. But as they explore further, they realize that the situation is more difficult than they expected. The ghosts at the site are much stronger than expected, which leads everyone to suspect that Cry has made an inaccurate analysis. A provocative hunter approaches Sven, complaining that if it hadn't been for Sven's useless orders, they would have finished the job a long time ago. In response, Sven says that he will listen to all the complaints as soon as the mission is completed, and until then, he tells him to be quiet. The angry hunter suggests that perhaps it's time they prayed to the master, Cry, because they're going to need all the help they can get. Henrik, another member of the team, intervenes, saying that although he doesn't know Cry that well, he trusts Sven completely and believes that everything will turn out all right. In a moment of respite, the hunter provocateur steps away to relieve himself and, indignant at the obsidian cross, mutters about how they are all cowards. He also sneers at Cry, saying that if Ark Rodan were in charge, things would be different, and that Cry is just having fun in the capital. As he grumbles, a noise catches his attention. He follows the sound, believing it to be one of the Wolf Riders, but when he arrives at the site, he comes across members of the Tower of Akasha, arguing among themselves about a monster they intend to unleash on the site to combat the 100 or so riders they are facing, and that they need to counter with maximum force. Meanwhile, one of the members of the Tower of Akasha wonders if that monster would really be the ideal choice, since it isn't even capable of using magic. During the conversation, the provocative hunter approaches them and manages to capture one of the members. The captured man questions whether he is there on behalf of 1,000 tricks. The hunter, on the other hand, claims that he is there on his own behalf, and that 1,000 tricks didn't even get involved with the White Wolf. The leader of the tower, Ross, takes the lead and injects the wolf with mana, forcing a grotesque magical transformation. Seeing this scene, the hunter realizes that he is dealing with something much more dangerous than he expected. Meanwhile, Sven and the others hear a distress call and set off to investigate. Arriving at the scene, they come across an injured and bloodied hunter who confirms that Cry was right about the dangerous slime. They come face to face with the huge slime, and Sven begins to attack it to hold it back. Henrik, for his part, rushes to heal the wounded hunter. The man explains that he saw two strange individuals injecting something into a wolf rider, turning him into that giant slime. The hunter's attacks don't seem to have any effect, and Sven quickly directs everyone to focus on dodging the attacks to try and contain the monster. He then takes Talia's special potion, which is capable of eliminating slimes, and lures the creature in another direction. When the slime jumps towards Sven, he puts the potion down and walks away. The monster falls on the potion, but surprisingly, is still alive. In the middle of this battle, Citri suddenly appears, explaining that she is there at the request of Cry, who predicted that things would get complicated and sent her to analyze the monster in question. Citri explains that the slime has a massive amount of magic spread across its skin, creating a powerful force field. This field allows the slime to dodge the hunter's arrows and neutralize their magic. During her analysis, Citri realizes that the monster is trying to replenish its damaged body by absorbing mana material, and is therefore intent on devouring her, as Citri has the most mana in the room. Even in danger, Citri advances towards the creature, showing a certain pity as she sees the slime as a failed invention. Sven, concerned, asks her to move away, but she thanks him and continues fighting, throwing a substance towards the slime while Sven shoots to break the container over the monster. Curious as to what Citri had thrown, Sven asks, and she explains that it was anti-magic. Just then, Sergeant Gark appears, and Citri comments that he has a suspicion about who might be manipulating the situation to cause this chaos. Meanwhile, Noctis discovers that his monster has been easily defeated, which worries him. Back at Citri's, she explains that Akasha Tower is conducting experiments to control the treasure vault at will, but believes that because Noctis has been banished from the Empire, he has hidden away in some underground lair. Citri suggests interrogating the two captured mages, as she believes there are still more monsters to be sent against them. She is willing to fight alongside everyone, but makes it clear that she will need everyone's strength, as she won't be able to face the challenge alone like Cry. Henrik praises Citri, saying that she's really strong for saying it out loud. However, Sven warns Henrik not to get carried away by her words. After all, Citri is just as powerful as any other member of the group. Meanwhile, in the tower, the members are informed of Sophia's orders to release the fortified ghosts one by one. When Flick discovers this strategy, he can't hide his dissatisfaction. He believes that Sophia is making a critical mistake, giving her enemies an obvious advantage by not releasing all the ghosts at the same time. To him, Sophia is just a scientist who doesn't understand anything about real battles. Frustrated, Flick orders them to call Sophia immediately. However, the men inform him that she's busy checking the defense system and won't even respond via the resonating stone. This only increases Flick's irritation, who can't believe that such a careless leader could lead the group to victory, even in a seemingly easy fight. One of the members suggests that they ignore Sophia's orders and do what they think is right. Flick quickly agrees and decides on her own. Release all the ghosts at once. Let's crush the enemy in one fell swoop. He completely ignores Sophia's plan to release them gradually, opting for a much more aggressive approach. Meanwhile, Citri continues to interrogate the two captured mages, asking directly if their leader is the Master Mage. She doesn't stop there. She wants to know exactly where to find this man. Citri even promises that if they cooperate, she will guarantee their safety. However, the magicians refuse any cooperation, declaring that they would give their lives for their master. Impressed by their loyalty, Citri realizes that they must be disciples of Incus, a renowned magician. She says that she has been investigating the HX Tower for a long time and recognizes the two, suggesting that she knows them better than they know. With a calm tone, Citri makes it clear that she has no desire to hurt them or use brute force. His only goal is to obtain information about Noctis's whereabouts. However, when the mages realize her insistence, they lower their heads, clearly showing that they don't intend to betray their master, no matter what. Citri makes a bold decision. Without hesitation, Citri pulls an illegal potion from her pocket, determined to use it on the two captured mages to force them to talk. However, one of the hunters immediately rebukes her, warning of the dangers of this substance, known for its devastating side effects. Despite the warnings, Citri stands her ground. She argues that Noctis is on the loose, and, if he escapes, the situation will be catastrophic for everyone. Even though he understands her concern, Gark intervenes, pointing out that even though they are criminals, mages still have rights and cannot be treated in any way. In the middle of the discussion, a deafening bang echoes outside. The captured mages, realizing the situation, begin to laugh and mock, saying that the hunters will finally receive the fate they deserve. As soon as she sees the enemy, Citri remains calm and explains that these ghosts have multiple magical barriers. She instructs the hunters to find out, by elimination, which elements can break down these defenses. Surprised by her coolness, Sven comments that Citri seems completely unconcerned, even when facing a ghost that is much faster and more dangerous than the previous one. Unfazed, Citri orders the hunters with shields to advance to the front line. According to her, shields are essential for identifying the power and direction of the enemy's force field. During her test with the shields, Citri discovers that the ghost's force field rotates like a spiral to the right, but varies according to the part of its body. After finishing her analysis, she concludes that hand-to-hand combat is practically impossible against this monster. Suddenly, another ghost appears in the area, making everyone even more tense. The hunters suggest that Citri back off, as dealing with just one ghost would be extremely difficult, let alone two. Nevertheless, Citri orders the mages to stop attacking. Something unexpected happens. The two ghosts start fighting each other. Confused, the hunters wonder what's going on. Citri explains that these ghosts were attacking the hunters just to replenish their mana supplies. As ghosts have large amounts of mana in their bodies, they end up seeing themselves as more attractive targets and start fighting each other, attracting even more attention from other ghosts in the area. Watching the ghosts destroy each other, Gark sneers at the scene, calling them pathetic. Meanwhile, the tower's mages show frustration with their own research, never imagining that such advanced ghosts could have such a basic weakness. Talia, on the other hand, wonders why they released all the ghosts at once instead of sending them out gradually as Sophia had ordered. Outraged, Noctis gives the tower members a severe scolding, reminding them that Sophia's orders should be followed as if they were his own. He points out that disobedience has resulted in a very serious mistake. Faced with the reprimand, the three subordinates apologize. Looking for a solution, Noctis consults Sophia about the next steps. She assesses the situation and explains that the dynamics have changed. In addition to Citri joining the investigation group, Gark Walter, a former level 7 hunter, has also taken action. Although he has long since retired, Sophia emphasizes that Gark is still a legendary hero. She adds that, with the loss of the transformation potions, the fight has become much more challenging. Faced with this situation, Noctis suggests a strategic retreat, but Sophia refuses. For her, retreating now is not an option, as it would damage their position inside the Akasha Tower. In addition, two of the tower's mages are being held hostage by their enemies, which complicates the situation even further. Sophia is concerned that the hostages might reveal vital information under pressure. Flick, trying to calm the situation, reminds them that these magicians have sworn their loyalty to Noctis and would not give in so easily. However, Sophia points out that even if the mages remain silent, Citri still has the means to locate their base. This would make the battle even more difficult and risky for the tower. Determined, Sophia proposes attacking the enemies first to ensure victory. Her plan involves using the Malice Eaters to subdue the hunters, luring them into a fatal ambush. Once the enemy is within range, Akasha Tower will use all its weapons and strategies to ensure victory. Sophia makes it clear that the only way to prevent critical information from being leaked is to eliminate all opponents at once. Although Noctis finds Sophia's plan interesting, he points out that the Malice Eaters have had superficial training, and without a good commander, the results could be disastrous. Sophia, without hesitation, gives the responsibility of command to Flick, who reluctantly accepts. Meanwhile, Talia observes Citri from afar, and remembers his reputation as a prodigy. She reflects on how Citri has always shown unwavering passion and incomparable talent, being recognized as a true genius. This memory brings up feelings of inferiority for Talia, who believed she would never measure up to Citri. But as impressed as she was, Talia also remembers how Citri never gave up until she reached the truth, regardless of the complexity of the situation. This inspired her, even if it raised doubts about her own worth. As the group advances, Sven notices Talia lost in thought, and tries to strike up a conversation to distract her. However, he notices the two mages from Akasha Tower staring at Talia and begins to wonder why they are so attentive. He concludes that their curiosity may be because of her unique hair, but he keeps his guard up. At another point, Gark talks to Citri, suggesting that she not push herself too hard, reminding her that even with so many hunters mobilized, the mission is only an investigation. He points out that confronting the Akasha Tower head-on is impossible without more support. Citri listens in silence, but soon reunites with the group. Based on a detailed analysis of the clues gathered, Citri pinpoints the probable location of the enemy base on the map. However, the tower mages immediately deny this and try to divert her attention, claiming that her analysis is wrong. But, observing the mage's nervous reaction, the group interprets this as confirmation that the base really is in the location indicated. They decide to act quickly and plan to attack Noctis before he can escape. While the mages beg for Sophia's name so that they can be freed, Sven and the others wonder who she is. Citri clarifies that Sophia is one of Noctis's disciples and his most dangerous rival. She also reveals that Akasha Tower will only continue its research if they manage to capture Noctis and Sophia, something Citri vows to prevent at all costs. Even with the magicians assuring her that Sophia would never be defeated by someone like Citri, she responds with confidence. Admitting that he had previously failed to capture her, Citri promises to make amends and regain his honor, vowing to defeat Sophia and put her in prison, ending the Akasha Tower's activities once and for all. Meanwhile, Cry makes his way slowly into the forest, accompanied by Tino and Liz. He deliberately slows down the pace, hoping that the problem will have been solved by the time they arrive. After all, he is running low on relics and security rings. Meanwhile, the investigation group continues to advance, with Citri being praised as an unbeatable prodigy in strategy and combat. In the middle of their trek, the group is surprised by Flick, who appears out of nowhere, launching a powerful magical attack. Confident, Flick believes that his blow has annihilated all the hunters, certain that this will please his mentor, Noctis. However, to his surprise, Citri reappears unharmed and taunts Flick, making it clear that he underestimated the group. She points out that casting such destructive spells while holding two Akasha Tower hostages is a reckless strategy. Flick, frustrated, tries to justify his actions by saying that he wants to take back the humiliation that Sophia has put him through. But Citri is unperturbed and calmly explains that Flick's attack is only average, something that experienced hunters like her have faced countless times in high-level vaults. She then coordinates the hunters to counterattack, with Sven leading the offensive. Meanwhile, Noctis, watching from afar, loses patience with Flick for disobeying his orders again. Instead of bringing all the Malice Eaters, Flick brought only one, weakening his chances of victory. The members of Akasha Tower realize that the situation is getting complicated and suggest that Noctis retreat while they hold off the hunters. However, Noctis decides to stay, convinced that he can still turn the tide. On the battlefield, Citri and Sven locate the entrance to the enemy base. Just then, Gark appears, ready to infiltrate and help the group. Meanwhile, Cry continues on his way, oblivious to what's going on. Now it remains to be seen how Citri and his group will face the dangers of Akasha Tower, and whether they will finally manage to capture Sophia, Citri's declared rival. If you want to know how this story continues, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and get ready for part 9. See you in the next video. Cheers!